Now I'll try providing more details about the components, their definitions, the scientific background. Okay, we have defined, as said before, 5 components related to heat stress, cold stress, extreme precipitation, drought, and extreme wind. The selection stems from the experience of North American and Australian actuaries' climate indices. However, for each component, a climate indicator has been adopted as a sort of proxies for weather-related hazards. But now it's time to give some insights about climate indicators. We have to say that climate indicators have only a limited information content if compared to more time and computational resource demanding physically based modeling, but they are a consolidated way to return information about the frequency and severity of weather-induced hazards. We usually use this one for moderately rare events, while for rare events, more complex statistical approaches are required, for example, extreme value analysis. Finally, selecting an indicator entails a choice in terms of trade-off for maximizing the information content. For example, for hydraulic hazard, the reference time span is strictly related to the geomorphological features of the basins, from few minutes in a highly sailed urban basin up to several days for the longest rivers in natural basins. So we have to take into account all these aspects. Also for this definition, we start from North American Actuaries Climate Index, but we have carried out a further desk review, considering also European references, for example, European Environmental Agency indicators. Okay, the reference dataset, as said before by Antonio, it is the 5th generation of SCMWF reanalysis, EURA5, with a global coverage and an horizontal resolution of about 31 kilometers. Data are available since 50s up to now. Data are available on the climate data store of Copernicus Climate Change Service. The latency of about 5 days permits a prompt update of the component of the European Extreme Events Climate Index and their components, but probably more details will be given by Chiara Cagnazzi in their talk after. Okay, which are the stages that are required for defining the components and then the indicators? First of all, the identification of a significant threshold for extreme events. After the standardization process, we have used in this case 30 years from 1981 to 2010, and the standardization is a key aspect of the process. Making possible the comparison among different components, different dynamics, different metrics, but in a way also limiting the potential weaknesses and systematic biases in the input dataset. The third aspect, the third stage, is then the computation of the component in the operational mode. So we can start for the first one, heat stress. The procedure is quite simple. We have fixed the calendar day. After, we have identified the 5-day moving windows. So for the reference period, the 30 years, we have 150 values, 30 years for 5 days. Then it makes possible to computation of the 95th percentile of the maximum temperature. Then for each year and each month, the number of days for which maximum temperature is higher than the threshold is computed. The values for the reference time span are used for the standardization process, simply by computing mean and standard deviation, then permitting the calculation month by month of the standardized component. For cold stress, the procedure is quite similar, but of course, in this case, we are interested to 5th percentile of minimum temperature. And after, for each year and each month, we assess the number of days below the threshold. After the standardization, the computation assume the same rules. Extreme precipitation. In this case, we compute the 90-50 percentile of daily precipitation at a monthly base, so not using moving windows. And for each year, each month over the reference period, we compute the cumulative precipitation exceeding the threshold. After, for each month over the reference period, these values are used for standardization, then permitting again the computation of the component month by month. For drought, we select in this case a very consolidated indicator, standardized precipitation index as suggested by McKee and colleagues. It represents the number of standard deviation that observed cumulative precipitation deviates from the climatological average. Of course, we set as climatological period again the reference period 1981, 20 and 10, but this index requires also the identification of a cumulative period for assessing the index. So we selected the 3 months following the example of European Environmental Agency indicators. So for each month over the reference period, we have computed the cumulative values. After these values has been fitted by a gamma distribution, transformed in a normal distribution, permitting to compute month by month the SPI. Of course, to maintain the consistency with the other components for which following the general rule, the higher the value, the higher the expected hazard, we use the opposite of the SPI3 value. Finally, we have extreme wind. For extreme wind, we again define the 90-50 percentile of maximum daily wind speed at monthly basis. After we use from retrieved by the literature the indicator local loss index as suggested by Donat and colleagues, where the ratio between the maximum daily wind speed and the threshold is computed but cubed as a proxy of wind power, recognized as more correlated to wind-induced damages. After the standardization and the computation for the operational stages are very similar to those that we have seen for the other components. Okay, now we can see some results at the country level, because as said before by Antonio, at the moment the data at country level are available. In particular, the general rule is that all the computation are carried out at the grid point level and after aggregated for the administrative unit level of interest. In this case, we are in the graph, we are the monthly values for the component. In this case, it's stress. The bold line represents the latest 10 years, not included in the reference period. After we include 2 tables, the first one reports the number of values exceeding 1 for each 10 years and the occurrence of top 5 values. This is the situation for Italy. For the heat stress, an increasing trend can be recognized with only 6 events in the first 10 years, then are monthly values exceeding 1, and 42 in the latest 10 years. 3 or among the top 5 values are again concentrated in the latest 10 years, and in some cases, high values are well correlated to, unfortunately, to large impact. For example, we report in the slide the cases of summer 2003 and summer 2018. In this case, the damages and the impacts are also collected in the MDAT catalog. Okay. For cold stress, a decreasing trend can be recognized with 19 events in the first 10 years and only 4 in the most recent 10 years. Okay. Also in this case, we have at least two events reported also in the MDAT catalog, for example, for the winter 1987 and the winter 2012. Extreme precipitation. In this case, we can be recognized an increasing trend only a monthly value exceeds 1 in the first 10 years, while 15 values exceed the same threshold in the latest 10 years, and 4 over the top 5 values are again occurred in the latest 10 years. In this case, we have different values, monthly values associated to large impact, also reported in this case in the MDAT catalog, but also in the rapid mapping activation of Copernicus Emergency Management Service. The acronym for these events are reported in the slides. In this case, we consider, for example, October 2018 and November 2019, where different events affected different parts of Italy. Okay, for drought, we have that top 5 values are all concentrated in the most recent 10 years. It is important to see how the last spring, beyond the COVID experienced by Italy, was among the driest for the country, with different values much higher than 1. We have also a photo by the Po River. For the wind, as said before, first of all, 3 among the top 5 values are again concentrated in the most recent 10 years, but we have a monthly values much higher than the other ones. It corresponds to October 2018, when a viastorm affected large parts of Italy, in particular northeastern part. So, of course, it is collected also in MDAT and Copernicus Emergency Management Service list. For this reason, this value, it is currently the only one exceeding 1 in terms of European Extreme Events Climate Index. Also for the joint effect of the viastorm, so the wind, intense winds, in particular of heavy precipitation, as seen before for extreme precipitation monthly datasets. All this data can be downloaded, as reported before by Antonio. There is a dedicated page about in Data Climb. The link is reported in these slides, and you can download the data in terms of area of interest. Of course, you have to select the data set, in this case area 5. The administrative unit at the moment are available only country level and the area. An example, for example, for the Italy that we have seen few moments ago. After, you can download the data also in terms of period of interest. In this case, for example, I've selected June 1981. Of course, for all the countries, for all are reported the data for all the components and for the synthetic index. So, also, if we have now released the platform, the data are available, we are yet in pre-operational stage, and at this phase, your feedbacks, your insights, your suggestions, but also your indication for inconsistency in the dataset are very important and crucial for a proper update, improvement of the tool. So we have prepared a brief survey. The link are reported again in the slides. So I'd like to invite you to dedicate few minutes of your time to fill this survey. Your requirement will be collected, processed, and can play a relevant role to improve our tools. Finally, some ideas, some insights about next stages. We are divided in short term and long term. First of all, in a few weeks, the data will be made available at final levels of administrative aggregation, for example, NATS 1, NATS 2, and so on. Specific indicators for others not properly accounted by the climate indicators that you have now included will be added, for example, for forest fires or for coastal floodings. The added value associated to use of the Area 5 land with an horizontal resolution of 9 kilometers is now under investigation. Afterwards, the data for indicators as computed by North American Actuaries Climate Index over Europe will be added and made available for downloading in the data client page, permitting the comparison between the two approaches. User and engineering guide, as said before by Antonio, will be finalized, including dashboard in a few days. A dedicated on long term, a dedicated platform to consult the downloaded data is now under development. After a systematic comparison with data components as computed by North American Actuaries Climate Index is now allowed by the release of the ERA 5 data since 50s. Finally, our ambition is that of moving from the other to the risk, including also data about exposure and vulnerabilities. Thank you for your attention. I'm, of course, available for your questions. Thank you.